"What's the matter, old man? Lose your nerve or your hat?" The foreman sneered as he kicked dust in the ranger's face, laughing with his crew as they circled tighter. The ranger clenched his fists, jaw tightening, but before he could speak, something stirred in the tall grass behind them. A Mustang stepped forward, calm, silent, with the old man's battered hat clenched in its teeth. The crew froze, eyes narrowing, but when the horse refused to let go, and what the rangers found after, it left the entire valley in tears. Welcome to MS Incredible Stories. Let's uncover what really happened. He stepped out of the ranger's shack before sunrise, boots crunching on frost-hardened earth. Dawn's first pale glow crept across the prairie, illuminating the tall grasses, swaying like silent witnesses to secrets the Mountains held. His hand tightened instinctively around the brim of his wide-brimmed hat, but the familiar weight was gone. Panic rose. The hat, worn smooth by years under wind and sun, was missing. Without it, he felt exposed, a sentinel without his badge. He retraced his steps along the winding trail, breath pluming in the chill air. Each footfall stirred memories. The day he received that hat from the old man who'd once patrolled this very valley, the tales passed between them beside crackling campfires. Those memories felt as tangible as the morning mist, yet the hat itself had vanished, leaving his hands empty and his heart heavy. A soft whicker alerted him. He froze, scanning the horizon where shadowed shapes grazed near the creek. As the sun lifted higher, a lone Mustang emerged from the reeds, coat dusted with dew. The stallion paused, nostrils flaring, eyes fixed on the empty space atop the ranger's head. The connection was immediate, as though the horse recognized something missing and felt compelled to fill the void. He knelt at the water's edge, scanning ripples for clues. The Mustang's gaze never wavered, ears forward, muscles tense. When the horse approached, he extended an open palm, palms empty but hopeful. The stallion edged closer, sniffing the air where fabric scent should have lingered. Still nothing. He whispered the old man's name, as if calling forth guidance from beyond. The horse dipped its muzzle toward his knees, nostrils brushing denim, searching for the same old scent. Sunlight glinted off something half buried in the mud, the edge of a leather band. Heart hammering, he reached down and pulled free the tattered remnant of his hat's inner sweatband. It was torn, sodden, and unrecognizable. The stallion stamped impatiently, as though urging him onward. With the broken fragment in hand, he rose. Empty-handed no longer, he felt a flicker of purpose ignite within him. Together, man and Mustang, they would track the lost piece of history, uncovering along the way the echoes of an old friendship buried in this land. Before the sun had fully claimed the sky, the ranger followed the stallion's tracks beyond the creek's edge, boots sinking into dew-soaked soil. The Mustang's hoofprints led toward a stand of juniper and pinyon pines where the air smelled of resin and earth. He paused at the tree line, heartbeat echoing through the hush, and noticed something half hidden beneath a tangle of sagebrush. Pulling aside, brittle branches revealed an old leather satchel, its flap torn and edges frayed. The sight of it sent a jolt through him. He remembered the satchel the old man always carried, rusted locks clinking against metal at his side. Kneeling, he brushed off layers of dust and dried grasses. Inside, in careful rows, lay hand-drawn maps of hidden springs, annotations and faded ink marking places only the old ranger had known. A battered photograph slipped from beneath the maps, its corners curled. He unfolded it gently. The old man in his prime, leaning against a sturdy wagon wheel, hat tilted jauntily, arm draped over the neck of a young Mustang. The horse's eyes gleamed with intelligence, the same amber curiosity he'd seen in the stallion now guiding him. A breeze stirred, carrying the Mustang's soft knickers, and the animal stepped forward, nostrils quivering as it studied the photo. The ranger tucked the maps into his jacket and slipped the photograph into his pocket, rubbing the worn edges. He sensed that these relics were more than mementos. They were a guide to something hidden and precious. He looked back to the stallion, whose coat glinted in the growing dawnlight. The horse lowered its head and pawed at the ground where a faint depression hinted at something buried beneath. Dropping to one knee again, the ranger began to unearth a triangular brass buckle, tarnished but unmistakable, the clasp from the old man's hatband. His chest tightened as he realized the trail wouldn't end here. It would lead deeper into secrets the valley had long held, secrets that intertwined the fates of man and Mustang across generations. Gathering the sagging satchel, the maps, and the buckle, he straightened. The Mustang nudged him forward, ready to lead the way. As they moved on, the ranger's empty hands felt steadier, filled now with fragments of history. Ahead lay hidden springs and forgotten paths. But most important was the promise etched in that photograph. A promise that the old man's legacy and the Mustang's loyalty would illuminate the truth waiting in the wilderness. Pale morning light filtered through dusty pines as the ranger and the stallion pressed on into a shallow wash. The ground here was churned and scarred, evidence of heavy rains long past. He scanned the earthen walls for signs, roots, stones, anything that might reveal a hidden hollow. The Mustang paused, one hoof raised, nostrils flaring against the scent of sun-baked clay. Leaning low, the ranger spotted a faint impression in the dust, a circular outline half buried at the base of the wash's lip. Kneeling, he scraped away fine soil with gloved fingers until the familiar curve of felt emerged. Heart pounding, he lifted it out, the brim of his hat caked in grime and flecked with dried mud. The sweatband was gone, torn away in pieces, but the crown remained intact, bearing the ridge where the leather buckle had gripped it. He cradled the hat as if it were a living thing. This object, mundane yet sacred, had been part of him for longer than memory allowed. Here it lay discarded by time and tide, waiting for discovery. A sudden breeze stirred the stallion's mane, and the horse pawed the ground again, restless. The ranger lifted the hat to his chest, tracing the welt where the buckle had sat, now replaced by the brass clasp he carried in his pocket. As he stood, he noticed a narrow ledge carved into the wash wall just above. It was barely wide enough for a horse's hoof, but shadowed and overlooked. The stallion nudged him toward it, breath warm against his sleeve. Curiosity ignited. He climbed the sloping bank, hat tucked under his arm, and peered over the edge into a hidden alcove. Sunlight slanted in, revealing weathered initials etched into the rock face. JH and MS, joined by a looping infinity symbol. Below, remnants of leather straps lay coiled, perhaps part of an old bridle or pack gear. The initials matched those on the photograph. The old man, Joshua Hart, and his mare, Midnight Sun. Dropping his hand to the stallion's flank, the ranger felt a surge of connection across time. The hat's journey, from Joshua's head to this secret resting place, spoke of loyalty and loss, of paths walked together. With the brim once more in hand and the buckle secured, he turned to the Mustang. Together they would follow the next clue, drawn by echoes of a friendship that refused to fade, and unravel the heartbreaking truth buried beyond the wash. Dawn's light sifted through the alcove as the ranger studied the carved initials. Joshua Hart and Midnight Sun. Their names intertwined in stone spoke of a bond forged in silence and wind. He tucked the brim under his arm and slid down to the stallion, whose dark eyes reflected curiosity and patience. The horse's soft knickers seemed to insist they press onward. Together they retraced the wash's edge until the canyon widened into a meadow dotted with wildflowers. The air here carried a faint scent of sage and old leather, as though the land remembered every story ever lived upon it. The ranger reached into the satchel, unfolding one of the hand-drawn maps. Ink-blotted lines wove across the page, leading to a spring marked with a simple heart. He compared it to his surroundings, a clump of cottonwoods beside a rocky ledge. Guided by the stallion's steady gait, they navigated through knee-high grasses until the trees whispered overhead. At the heart symbol's location, the ground was soft and mossy, a stark contrast to the dry earth they'd left behind. He knelt, fingertips brushing damp stones, and uncovered a small wooden box, its lid etched with the same infinity symbol. Inside lay 2 rusted spurs, their metal long since corroded but still bearing the faint imprint of a Mustang's head. He lifted one spur, imagining Joshua fastening it to Midnight Sun's stirrup, feeling the horse's heartbeat beneath his own. The stallion circled him, nostrils flaring, as if recognizing relics of his ancestor. Warmth pooled in the ranger's chest, a quiet echo of friendship that transcended decades. These artifacts were more than mementos. They were milestones on a path of loyalty and shared adventure. A distant caw of raven wings startled him back to the present. He snapped the box closed and secured the spurs in his pack. Glancing at the stallion, he realized that every discovery deepened their unspoken understanding. This journey wasn't just about recovering lost items. It was about honoring a legacy of trust between man and horse. The sun broke above the ridge, gilding the meadow in gold. Rising, the ranger dusted his hands on his pants and exchanged a slow nod with the stallion. Ahead lay Joshua's final waypoint, whispered in ink and stone. With spirits lifted by echoes of friendship, they set off toward the next horizon, united by a promise etched in time. In the heat of midday, the river's gentle murmur guided the ranger and the stallion downstream, where sun-dappled water lapped against smooth stones. The Mustang waded in first, hooves sending ripples across the clear current. The ranger followed, boots squelching in the shallows, eyes scanning the bank for footprints older than their own. Along the riverbank, hoofprints mingled with human boot marks, creating a subtle trail leading beneath a leaning sycamore. He paused where the prints deepened, as though someone had knelt or stooped here. The soil was soft, bearing the indent of a leather glove and a horseshoe pressed deep by weight. He knelt to examine it, tracing the curve with a gloved finger, and realized the horseshoe matched the shape of the rusted spurs he'd found in the meadow. This was Midnight Sun's path, and it had ended here. His gaze lifted to the stallion, drinking from the river's curve. The horse turned, water dripping from its muzzle, and stepped onto a narrow spit of land where the current formed a gentle eddy. The ranger joined him and noticed a dark stain on a flat rock, half covered by moss, old blood, now dried to a deep mahogany. A whisper of wind carried memories of past rides and shared danger. He knelt again, heart tightening, and slid his hand beneath the moss, uncovering a folded piece of parchment sealed with crimson wax. The seal bore an infinity symbol. With careful fingers, he broke the seal and unfolded the paper. In cramped handwriting, Joshua Hart had scrawled a final note. For love and loyalty, even when fate parts us. Beneath the words lay a simple map pinpointing a bend in the river where a hidden ford lay, now overgrown. The stallion stamped, impatient, nudging the ranger's shoulder as if urging him onward. Slipping the note into his pocket, the ranger stood, brushing dirt from his knee. He retrieved the spurs from his pack and fitted one loosely across his palm, feeling the metal's weight and the echoes of every mile ridden. The Mustang's eyes met his, and in that gaze he sensed both hope and sorrow. Hope that the journey would reach its end, sorrow for the unspoken goodbye between Joshua and his mare. Shouldering the satchel once more, he followed the stallion along the river's curve. Together they would cross at the hidden ford, step by step honoring a promise penned in blood and bound by unbreakable trust. The afternoon sun beat down as they reached the hidden ford, the river narrowing to a shallow crossing beneath a canopy of willows. The stallion stepped confidently across, stirring currents around its legs, and the ranger followed, feeling the cool rush balm against his skin. On the opposite bank, a stand of alder trees sheltered a scatter of stones, and there, half buried at the foot of a gnarled root, lay the sweat-stained hat. He knelt and lifted it reverently, running fingertips over the cracked leather band. As he turned it over, something glinted inside the crown, a small, folded scrap of paper tucked beneath the lining. Pulling it free, he unfolded a hastily sketched diagram, lines pointing to a spot deep in the nearby woods marked Heartwood Grove. Beneath the sketch, a single sentence, "Find what I could not save." His pulse quickened. Joshua Hart had hidden this here, trusting that only someone who knew the hat's weight and worn ridges would notice this secret. He brushed a fingertip along a seam and discovered another clue. Invisible ink, revealed by the flicker of sunlight. Words emerged, coordinates and a date long past. The message read, December 12th, 45. Under the old cedar. The stallion nosed his hand, offering gentle support as though recognizing this hat still held Joshua's final wishes. The ranger replaced the paper inside, securing it against the wind. He settled the brim atop his head, feeling its familiar curve press snugly, and realized the hat was more than a memento. It was a key. Standing, he slugged a breath of the river's crisp air. The memory of the old man, guiding him with yarn-spun stories by campfires, felt as vivid as ever. The hat had borne witness to every whispered promise and perilous journey. Now, even after its time in the dust and currents, it spoke once more. He patted the stallion's neck, gratitude swelling in his chest. Together, they would follow this newest trail to Heartwood Grove and uncover what Joshua Hart could not save. The weight of the hat steadied him, reminding him that some secrets wait decades to be unearthed, and that true loyalty transcends time. Night settled like a blanket over the forest as the ranger and the stallion approached Heartwood Grove. Moonlight filtered through towering cedars, painting ghostly patterns on the forest floor. He tethered the horse to a low-hanging branch and unpacked a small camp lantern, its warm glow contrasting with the silver darkness. He sat against the trunk of the oldest cedar, its bark gnarled and smooth from centuries of wear. With careful fingers, he removed the hat and placed it on his knee, fingertips tracing the faded sweatband where Joshua's name had been stitched. The forest was alive with night sounds, the rustle of leaves, the call of owls, and the soft scuff of the Mustang shifting close beside him. Wind sighed through the branches as he unfolded the scrap of paper hidden beneath the lining. The coordinates led here, but the date, December 12th, 1945, suggested a moment frozen in time long before he was born. He studied the map's lines, noting a circle drawn around a knot in the cedar's roots. Rising on one knee, he knelt at that spot, brushing aside fallen needles and moss. His gloved hand struck something solid, a rusted tin box, edges corroded with age. Carefully, he pried it free and set on a flat stone illuminated by lantern light. The stallion nudged closer, nostrils flaring as if sensing the box's importance. With deliberate slowness, the ranger lifted the lid. Inside lay a faded journal, its leather cover cracked, and beside it a slender locket tarnished by time. He opened the locket to reveal a miniature portrait. Joshua younger, smiling beside midnight sun, their faces alight with adventure. He lifted the journal and blew gently on its pages. The script inside was small and precise. Entries detailing Joshua's final days with midnight sun, his grief when she fell ill, and his vow to preserve her memory even after she was gone. Tears pricked his eyes as he read Joshua's last words. She was more than a horse. She was my heart. The stallion nickered softly, pressing his muzzle against the ranger's hand. The gesture felt like solace passed across generations. The ranger closed the journal and the locket, returning them to the tin box. He placed the hat atop the cedar's roots as an offering, honoring Joshua's love and loss. Under the watchful gaze of ancient trees, man and Mustang kept vigil through the night, not as hunter and hunted, but as guardians of a promise that had endured beyond death, bound by loyalty and a friendship that echoed through time. Dawn broke with a soft hush, sunlight filtering through cedar boughs and igniting motes of dust in the cool air. The ranger rose, brushing pine needles from his coat, and found the hat still resting on the roots where he'd left it. The tin box sat nearby, its contents safe but heavy with memory. As he secured the journal in his satchel, a breeze stirred the grove, carrying a faint melody of rustling leaves and the distant gurgle of water. He glanced at the stallion, whose dark eyes seemed to reflect the wind's secrets. Together they followed a narrow deer path that led deeper into the woods, stepping carefully over exposed roots and swaths of emerald moss. Each gust brushed against his face, whispering through the trees with a cadence that felt almost like words. At a fork in the trail, the wind shifted, guiding him toward a cluster of ferns draped over a fallen log. Beneath the log's shadow, he spotted fresh hoof prints beside older, deeper imprints. The Mustang paused and dipped his head, nostrils flaring in recognition. The ranger knelt to examine them. 2 sets of tracks, one wide and rounded, the other slender and pointed. He realized Midnight Sun had once passed this way, side by side with Joshua, forging their shared path. A sudden gust sent a swirl of leaves dancing across the forest floor, and for a heartbeat, the ranger half swam the air for meaning. Did he hear laughter? A soft exhale, like a horse's breath? Or was it simply the confluence of wind and memory? He pressed his palm against the log's damp wood, as if grounding himself in that moment, feeling the pulse of life that thrummed beneath bark and leaf. Casting one last look at the hoofprints, he rose. The wind carried him forward once more, beckoning them toward the river's source, where a hidden grotto lay waiting. The path wound uphill, the forest thinning until the canopy opened to reveal a cliffside waterfall glistening in morning light. As they crested the rise, the stallion nickered and pawed the rocky soil. The sound echoed off stone walls, rebounding like a call. The ranger felt the wind's final whisper. This way. Hat tilted snug on his head, he stepped forward, guided by invisible voices and the unbreakable bond that connected past and present. The grotto's cool spray misted the air as the ranger and the Mustang stood at its threshold, the waterfall's roar softened by moss-covered stone. He unhooked his canteen, offering water to the stallion, whose gentle nuzzle belied the wild power in its muscles. The ranger drank deeply himself, letting the clear liquid wash away dust and fatigue. Behind the curtain of water lay a hidden cave, its mouth shadowed and inviting. He stepped inside, torch held aloft, and saw carved initials lining the walls. JH and MS, joined again by the infinity symbol. Beneath them, etched dates marked seasons and years, a record of countless visits by Joshua and his mare. The ranger traced the carvings with a gloved fingertip, feeling the weight of every memory pressed into stone. The Mustang shifted, and a soft whicker echoed in the chamber. The ranger turned to find the horse, lowering its head to sniff a flat ledge where a pair of leather reins lay coiled. They were worn thin and stiff with age, but the brass buckles gleamed still. He picked them up, holding them aloft so the torchlight danced across the metal. The reins had belonged to Midnight Sun, proof of Joshua's devotion and the mare's trust. Securing the reins in his satchel, he paused to study the stallion's expression. Inside this sanctuary, man and horse stood as equals, bound by mutual respect. This bond mirrored that of Joshua and Midnight Sun, yet was new, a living testament to loyalty's enduring power. He knelt, resting a hand on the horse's muzzle, and whispered, "Thank you." The stallion's warm breath brushed his palm, and for a moment the distant past felt close enough to touch. As they exited the grotto, the ranger draped one of the reins across his shoulder. The path ahead would lead them to Joshua's final resting place. But here, in the hush of the hidden cave, he understood that every step of this journey was shaped by an unlikely bond between man and horse, past and present, and that their shared story would carry on through him. The sky burned amber as dusk settled over the valley, shadows stretching long across the grasslands. The ranger and the Mustang paused atop a gentle rise, surveying the landscape where Joshua Hart had once ridden beside his beloved mare. The air held a chill promise of night, and distant silhouettes of pinyon pines swayed against the glowing horizon. He consulted the journal, its pages creased where Joshua had marked a final destination, a solitary grave beneath a lone oak. The path wound through sagebrush and scattered boulders, the fading light casting eerie shapes that danced at the corner of his vision. The Mustang lowered his head, nostrils flaring as he sensed the nearing night. The ranger patted the horse's flank. "Almost there," he murmured, reins loose in his hand. They descended into a hollow where the lone oak stood sentinel, its branches skeletal against the evening sky. Beneath it, the earth had settled into a gentle mound, marked by a simple wooden cross half covered in lichen. The ranger dismounted and approached quietly, feeling the stir of unseen creatures in the underbrush. Kneeling before the grave, he removed the journal from his pack. Lantern light trembled in the dusk as he opened to Joshua's final entry. "Here she lies, my heart at rest. Guard her memory as you would your own." He closed the book and set it atop the mound, then retrieved the locket from the tin box and draped its chain across the cross. The Mustang stepped forward, lowering his muzzle to the ground, and nudged the soil tenderly with his nose, as if offering a silent farewell. The ranger laid the hat atop the journal, letting its brim catch the last rays of sun before night claimed the land. Wind stirred the oak's leaves, carrying a soft susurrus that felt like a sigh. Shadows deepened, and the first stars winked overhead. The ranger stood, brushing dust from his knees, and placed a gloved hand on the Mustang's neck. In that quiet moment, the boundary between past and present blurred. Joshua and Midnight Sun's story had found its conclusion, yet through him and this loyal companion, their bond would live on. With one last glance at the grave and the lone oak, the ranger mounted the Mustang. As they rode into the deepening night, the valley embraced them in silence, shadows trailing behind like echoes of a timeless friendship. Under a canopy of stars, the ranger guided the stallion away from the hollow where Joshua's mare rested forever. The night was quiet but for the soft clip of hooves and the whisper of wind through sage. He felt the weight of the journey settle in his chest. Every relic recovered, every memory honored, and knew there was one promise left to fulfill. As they descended toward the ranger station in the valley below, he spoke aloud into the stillness, his voice carrying like a vow among the pines. He would protect this land, these stories, and ensure that no legend faded into dust. The Mustang walked beside him, shoulder brushing his thigh in steady solidarity, as if pledging his own loyalty to that promise. At the edge of the station's lantern-lit clearing, the ranger paused. He removed his hat and lifted it toward the sky, imagining the old man's spirit on the wind. Though the brim was battered and the buckle tarnished, it still held the shape of hope. He set it on a fence post near the gate, where each passerby might glimpse its story and wonder at the journey it had taken. Riding forward, he carried the satchel containing the journal, the locket, the spurs, and the reins, treasures that spoke of an unbreakable bond between Joshua and Midnight Sunday. He would place them in the station's small museum case, keeping them safe and sharing their tale with every visitor who asked. The Mustang followed to the corral, where he would spend the night beneath the open sky. The ranger unfastened his saddle and draped a blanket across the horse's back. He leaned close and whispered, "Rest now, friend. We've done what we came to do." The horse nuzzled his shoulder, a gesture of gratitude that echoed through the hush of midnight. Turning back toward the station, the ranger cast one last glance at the fenced hat and the dark silhouette of the Mustang. In that moment, he felt the valley breathe around him, alive with memories, bound by promises, and guarded by two steadfast souls. Tomorrow, the sun would rise on a land renewed, and he would be ready, hat in hand and loyalty in heart, to keep watch over every echo of friendship that echoed across these wild places. Moonlight filtered through the corral's fence as the ranger checked the stallion's blanket, ensuring the horse's comfort for the night. The Mustang shifted, stamping once, and the ranger noticed fresh indentations in the soft earth beyond the fence. A second set of hoofprints layered over the ones they'd followed days ago. Curious, he slipped through the gate and crouched beside the tracks, brushing away loose dirt. Beneath the hoofprints lay a shallow depression, revealing a glint of metal. He reached down and lifted a rusted horseshoe charm, its edges etched with tiny symbols he didn't recognize. The Mustang nickered softly, nostrils flaring near his hand. The charm hung from a short leather thong, long since worn, but the craftsmanship hinted at a story beyond Joshua Hart's. He pocketed the charm and followed the prince as they led to a nearby storage shed, its door slightly ajar. Inside, pale moonlight revealed stacks of feed sacks and old tack, but at the far corner, dust-shrouded crates bore stenciled letters, CH Ranch. He pried one crate open with gloved fingers, uncovering weather journals stamped with the initials SH and bound by twine. Opening the top journal, he read the first entry. I cannot let go until I know he's safe. The handwriting was looser, urgent, unlike Joshua's careful script. The ranger's pulse quickened as he realized CH might be another guardian, another rider whose tale intertwined with Midnight Sun's legacy. The Mustang whickered again, urging him onward. He gathered the journals and the charm, then moved to the shed's back wall, where the wood was warped by moisture. Knocking gently, he found a hollow sound and pushed aside a loose plank, revealing a concealed niche. Inside lay a folded canvas wrapped around a slender object. Unfolding it, he revealed an intricately carved wooden staff topped with a Mustang's head, mane flowing in stylized curls. The staff's base bore a faint inscription, "For courage from Sich." He traced the carving, imagining the hands that had whittled it by candlelight long ago. Overnight, secrets had shifted beneath hooves, new clues that reached beyond Joshua Hart's story, whispering of other hearts tied to these lands. Tucking the staff beneath his arm, the ranger followed the Mustang back to the corral. The horse blew warm breath against his sleeve, and he understood that their journey was far from over. The valley held more voices, more bonds waiting to be uncovered. Under the watchful moon, man and horse prepared to pursue these new whispers on the wind. A sudden, piercing cry shattered the stillness, echoing across the corral like a wounded call. The ranger's heart lurched as he spun toward the sound, hand reaching for the flashlight strapped to his belt. The Mustang reared, coat bristling, and stamped urgently against the fence. He followed the cry into the darkness beyond the barn, boots crunching on gravel. The shriek came again, raw, desperate, leading him to the edge of the wooded copse. Moonlight slanted between trunks, illuminating a slender form huddled at the base of a pine. A fawn, its leg caught in a twisted snare buried in undergrowth. Fear glazed its wide eyes, and each breath came ragged and shallow. Kneeling slowly, the ranger set down his pack and spoke in soft tones. "Easy now, little one." The Mustang stepped forward, curious but gentle, muzzle sniffing the air. The fawn shrank back, trembling but did not flee. As the ranger knelt, he noticed the snare's loop was too tight, cutting into tender flesh. He unbuckled his leather glove and knelt beside the snare, working carefully to free the trap's mechanism. The fawn's cries waned as he loosened the wire, finally slipping the loop away. The animal collapsed in relief, body sagging as blood pooled beneath. The ranger tore a strip from his shirt and bound the wound with steady fingers, murmuring reassurance as he worked. The Mustang nuzzled the fawn's shoulder, offering warmth and presence. The deer's ear twitched, and for a moment, just a moment, it leaned into the stallion's side, trusting despite its fear. Once the bandage was secure, the ranger stood and retrieved his canteen, pouring water into a leaf bowl. The fawn drank greedily, then licked the horse's muzzle in thanks. A gentle breeze rustled overhead, carrying the fawn's relieved bleat through the trees. The ranger bit his lip, sensing the deeper meaning. The valley's inhabitants were bound by more than bloodlines or loyalty. They were partners in survival. The Mustang's calm courage had soothed the wild creature, and the ranger's hands had mended its wounds. As the fawn disappeared into the moonlit forest, the ranger and the stallion shared a quiet glance, understanding that their promise to protect this land extended beyond human and horse. In the hush that followed, compassion reigned under the wide Nevada sky, a bond forged in a cry at night. The next morning sun filtered through the barn's slatted walls as the ranger groomed the Mustang's coat, running a soft brush along sleek muscles. Each stroke stirred memories like dust motes in light. Stories of Joshua Hart and his mare, whispers preserved in every strand of mane. The ranch hands had begun to murmur, drawn to the legend unfolding at the corral gate, but the ranger welcomed only a few trusted ears. He lifted the hat from its post by the station entrance and carried it here, placing it gently beneath the stallion's muzzle. The horse inhaled deeply, as though tasting echoes of a man long gone. The ranger cleared his throat and addressed the handful of rangers gathered nearby. He recounted Joshua's first ride through these very fields, his gentle guidance of a frightened colt into calm waters, and the day midnight sun galloped alongside him at full tilt, mane streaming like banners in the wind. He spoke of how Joshua's voice had steadied the horse's heart during that storm years ago, how his laughter had drifted across the valley like music. He paused to let the words hang, then lifted the locket and journal so all could see. "This is more than history," he said softly. "It's a testament to compassion, courage, and the bonds we forge." A hush fell as the rangers envisioned Joshua and his mare, partners in work and spirit. One by one, they stepped forward, placing small offerings at the base of the hat: a bundle of wild sage, a carved wooden horseshoe, a ribbon from an old saddle strap. The Mustang watched, ears pricked, as if approving each gesture. When the circle was complete, the ranger mounted the stallion and nudged him toward the open gate. As the two disappeared down the dusty trail, the rangers turned back to their duties, hearts lightened by a story that transcended time. Behind them, the hat rested on its post, sun-bleached and revered, a silent keeper of the old man's memory. In every breeze that rustled its brim, Joshua Hart's spirit rode on, guiding those who followed the echoes of friendship through the endless Nevada sky. The air smelled of dust and tension as the ranger and the stallion returned to the station to find a heated argument unfolding beneath the porch. Two rangers, Cole and Marissa, stood toe-to-toe, voices low but sharp enough to carry. Cole accused Marissa of diverting supplies meant for trail maintenance toward a personal rescue effort, and Marissa shot back that the station's priorities were misplaced when injured wildlife cried for help. The Mustang shifted uneasily, lowering his head as if aware of the discord. The ranger dismounted and approached, hat in hand, his presence halting both arguments like a sudden gust stilling the winds. He listened as Cole spoke of duty, marked trails, visitor safety, and upholding regulations. Marissa countered with compassion: orphaned fawns, wounded coyotes, and the promise they'd made to protect every creature that called these lands home. When both had spoken their fill, the ranger raised his hand. He told them of Joshua Hart's journey and Midnight Sun's loyalty, not as a parable, but as a living truth witnessed in every hoofprint and artifact they'd uncovered. He spoke of that night in the corral when man, horse, and a trapped fawn had formed a silent pact of protection. He described how the Mustang had stood guard over a helpless creature, breaking the divide between predator and prey. Silence settled as Cole and Marissa absorbed the story. The ranger handed Marissa the rusted horseshoe charm, explaining its origins beyond Joshua's tale, another guardian's symbol woven into the valley's tapestry. Then he offered the carved staff from the shed, a reminder that courage often arrived in unexpected forms. Cole exhaled slowly, nodding toward Marissa. "Perhaps we've been too focused on the rules," he admitted. Marissa dipped her head in acknowledgement, "and I may have overlooked the station's core mission." The ranger tucked the artifacts into a display case by the porch and addressed them both. "Our loyalty must serve this land in all its forms, human, horse, and wild creature alike." The Mustang nickered softly, pressing his warm muzzle against the ranger's leg as if affirming the promise. Cole and Marissa exchanged a respectful nod, their fractured loyalties mended by shared purpose. As the sun dipped low, the trio, man, horse, and their fellow rangers, stood united, ready to honor every bond that defined their stewardship of the wilderness. Dust swirled across the plateau as the ranger and the Mustang galloped toward the rim where dark clouds churned above the canyon. A flash flood warning crackled from the handheld radio, Heavy rains upriver threatened to send torrents spiraling downstream in minutes. The ranger's heart pounded as he guided the stallion along the narrow ledge, the wind whipping mane and brim. Ahead, a herd of wild mustangs grazed near the riverbank, unaware of the danger. Among them, a mare and her foal stood rooted to the spot, eyes wide with alarm at the distant roar of water. The ranger urged the stallion into a low canter, weaving between sagebrush and outcrop, each leap edging them closer to the mustangs. His chest tightened. This was the moment Joshua Hart had warned of in his journals, when nature's fury tested every bond. He reached the foal first, its legs trembling as thunder rumbled overhead. Dismounting, he knelt and secured a lead rope around its neck, murmuring calm words. The mare nickered sharply, pawing the ground, but the mule's cries of panic were drowned by the rising crescendo of the canyon's roar. Slinging the foal's rope over his shoulder, he beckoned the mare to follow. The river spit white foam below as the first wall of water thundered into view. The ranger snapped his gaze upward. A narrow game trail wound upward through broken rock toward higher ground. Fetching the Mustang's reins, he swung onto its back and nudged it forward. The stallion surged to life, muscles coiling and propelling them upward. The mare followed, foal bundled safely against the ranger's chest, wings of panic propelling her strides. Rain began in stinging sheets, and the thunder's roar became nothing but background noise to the river's fury below. The ranger leaned forward, guiding the Mustang through slick shale until they crested a rocky outcrop. He leapt free and set down the foal, which staggered but held its legs. The mare nudged her offspring, and they huddled behind him as he patted their flanks. The stallion circled protectively, ears flat against the rain. Moments later, the flood swept the riverbed bare, waves cascading past the outcrop but never reaching them. Shivering but safe, the trio stood under pounding rain, bound by urgency and compassion. The ranger breathed out, voice rising in a vow. "We'll always outrun the storm together." And as the wind howled around them, man, mare, foal, and Mustang formed a living testament to every promise made in this wild land. A lone whistle shattered the morning calm as the ranger and the stallion crossed the ridge, ears straining to catch the faint yet urgent sound. It came again, a shrill call echoing off the sandstone cliffs below. The horse's head snapped up, nostrils flaring, and the ranger's pulse quickened. He recognized that tone, a distress signal from the backcountry patrol. They sprinted down the rocky slope, hooves kicking up dust until they reached the narrow span of a wooden footbridge swaying above a deep ravine. Beyond it, the whistle sounded once more, frantic and uneven. Dismounting, the ranger secured the Mustang to a boulder and crept across the bridge, each plank groaning underfoot. At the opposite end, he found gear scattered, backpacks, empty canteens, and a crumpled map fluttering in the breeze. The whistle blew again, guiding him toward a cluster of junipers where the ravine narrowed into a steep gulch. There, half hidden in shadows, lay one of the station's young recruits, clutching his side and gasping against a painful wound. A snarled rope trapped his leg beneath a fallen log, dark blood seeping into his pants. The Mustang whickered softly from the bridge, nose extended as though offering comfort. The ranger knelt beside the recruit, whispered reassurances, and worked quickly to free him. The log was heavy, but with a final heave, it rolled away enough to slip the recruit's leg free. He ripped a strip from his shirt to bind the wound, pressing firm until the bleeding slowed. As the recruit leaned back, relief flooding his eyes, the ranger looked to the Mustang still tethered above. He motioned, and the horse whinnied, tossing its head. The recruit managed a weak smile. "I owe you one." Supporting the young man's weight, the ranger guided him back across the bridge, the whistle of warning now lost to the canyon's roar. Behind them, the Mustang followed, steadfast as ever, proving once more that vigilance and loyalty could turn a call for help into a rescue born of trust. The late afternoon sun dipped low as the ranger led the wounded recruit toward camp, the Mustang walking close, its warm flank a steady reassurance. Each footstep crunched on the dry earth, and in the hush between them, the faint thump of the recruit's heartbeat echoed through the ranger's mind. It was a reminder that life here was fragile, sustained by rhythms both fierce and gentle. They paused at a shaded clearing ringed by juniper, where the ranger knelt to adjust the recruit's bandage. The horse lowered its head and sniffed the makeshift dressing before nudging the recruit's shoulder, offering quiet encouragement. The recruit managed a weak laugh. "You're quite the medic, aren't you?" The ranger smiled, brushing sweat from his brow. "Only the basics. But you've got a strong heart. It'll heal." He stood and reached into his pack, producing a canteen of water and 2 small cups. They drank in companionable silence while the Mustang grazed on sagebrush, nostrils flaring at each sprig. Glancing around, the ranger spotted a cluster of wild onions and pulled them free, handing a small bulb to the recruit. "Natural antiseptic," he explained, cutting it and applying the juice to the wound. The recruit winced but nodded, recognizing the ranger's knowledge of the land. As shadows lengthened, they resumed their trek. The stallion walked between them, a living bridge of strength and steadiness. The recruit pressed a hand to the horse's mane, feeling the pulse beneath, each throb mirroring his own beating heart, alive with gratitude. Night crept in as they reached the camp's perimeter, lanterns flickering against canvas tents. The ranger guided the recruit gently onto a cot and summoned fellow rangers to assist. The Mustang paused at the gate, head held high, amber eyes reflecting the glow of firelight. The ranger approached, unbuckling the saddle and draping it over the corral fence. He knelt to stroke the horse's neck, heart swelling with respect. "We made it," he whispered. In the wilderness, every rescued life was a victory, each saved heartbeat proof that compassion and courage could thrive even amid hardship. As he walked the Mustang back to its stall, the ranger carried with him the steady rhythm of that recruit's pulse, a reminder that in this wild land, every heartbeat mattered, and loyalty was the force that kept them all alive. The first pale light of dawn crept over the ridgeline as the ranger led the stallion from its stall toward the corral gate. Mist curled across the paddock, softening the rough edges of fence posts and hay bales alike. The horse's breath steamed in the cool air, and he nudged the ranger's hand, sensing the weight of the moment. Today, the stallion's path would diverge from the ranger's. After weeks of shared trials, storms outrunning floods, fawn rescues in moonlit woods, the unearthing of secrets etched in stone, the horse would return to the wild herd that roamed these canyons. The ranger retrieved the worn leather bridle, its brow band studded with tiny symbols of loyalty, and fastened it gently. The stallion lowered his head, accepting the touch as a benediction. They walked to the corral's far gate, where a group of fellow rangers stood quietly, hats in hand. Each carried an offering, a sprig of sage, a loop of braided mane, pages from Joshua Hart's journal. The rangers stepped aside, and one by one, they laid their tokens at the stallion's feet. The air hummed with gratitude and sorrow in equal measure. The ranger took a breath and climbed onto a low mounting block. The horse stood still, muscles rippling beneath its coat, as though steeling itself for the ride ahead. He slid into the saddle, heart tightening as the stirrup pressed underfoot. The Mustang shifted, and the ranger whispered, "Go free." With a final nod, the stallion stepped forward, hooves crunching the gravel. Rear legs coiled, then surged into motion, carrying horse and rider down the trail they had first entered together. The ranger watched until the silhouette merged with saffron light and vanished among the rocks. He slipped from the mounting block and retrieved the bridle, turning it over in his hands. The morning chorus of canyon wrens greeted the new day, and he felt the land breathe around him, renewed by every bond honored and every promise kept. Clutching the bridle to his chest, he whispered into the sunrise, "Thank you, my friend." And as the Mustang's echoing hoofbeats faded, the ranger knew that their story would live on in every wind-whispered legend and every sunrise over the Nevada wilderness. The ranger returned to the station with the bridle cradled in his arms, its beads of dust catching the morning light. Within the corrals, the team gathered around a large oak table littered with maps, journals, and relics. Joshua's maps beside new sketches of trails and historical sites. It was time for their next mission, preserving this valley's stories and protecting its future. He laid the bridle gently beside Joshua's journal and addressed the assembled rangers, their faces bright with determination. Supplies were packed. First aid kits, field cameras, archival cases for artifacts, and satellite beacons for tracking wildlife. They would fan out across the canyons, retracing Joshua's mapped routes and searching for unmarked springs, hidden carvings, and any whispers of interspecies bonds like those he and the stallion had witnessed. One team set out toward Heartwood Grove to clear fallen logs and install protective signage around the cedar alcove. Another headed to the river fork where Joshua's final note had pointed, determined to chart the old ford and secure safe crossings for both wildlife and hikers. A third party would venture into the juniper-lined flats to document new hoofprint trails, ensuring that the stories written in dust and stone would be recorded before they vanished. The ranger strapped on his pack and fastened Joshua's journal to his belt. As he and his partner Sergeant Marissa stepped beyond the station walls, he felt the press of history in every gust of wind. Their quest was more than surveying land. It was weaving threads between past and present, between human, horse, and every wild creature that called this place home. At the canyon rim, they paused, scanning the expanse bathed in gold. He pulled the bridle from his pack and smiled, recalling the stallion's farewell gallop. The bridle would become the centerpiece of a new interpretive exhibit, telling visitors of the journey they had shared, the bonds they had forged, and the promise that loyalty could change the natural order. With a final nod, the ranger and Marissa descended into the canyon, ready to uncover more secrets beneath hooves, in dusty hollows, and along rushing streams. Their quest had begun, and with each discovery, they would honor Joshua Hart's legacy, ensuring that every echo in these wild canyons endured for generations to come. The dawn wind carried the scent of juniper as the ranger rode out alone into the open expanse where sagebrush rolled to distant ridgelines. The trail was familiar yet renewed, etched first by Joshua's path, then worn smooth by the Mustang's hooves and their shared journey. He carried the bridle across his saddle, its straps flapping softly like a silent herald. He paused atop a low bluff, surveying the mosaic of canyons and plateaus bathed in morning light. The valley stretched vast and unbroken, a living testament to both solitude and interconnection. He dismounted, leading the horse to a stand of silverleaf sage where he knelt to attach a small camera to a sturdy branch. This device would capture the land's moods, sunset golds, storm-darkened skies, the quiet moments when wildlife emerged from hidden corners. The Mustang nuzzled his shoulder, gentle and steady, as if understanding that technology and tradition could walk side by side. The ranger patted its neck and mounted once more, urging the horse toward a ribbon of wildflower-lined creek that glinted like a vein of life through the desert floor. He planned to follow it today, mapping its source and noting signs of nesting birds and crossing deer. Each hoofbeat echoed off stone walls carved by eons of wind and water, a rhythmic reminder of time's passage. He pictured Joshua and Midnight Sun once riding this same waterway, their laughter and hoof thunders mingling with the creek's murmur. Now he carried their legacy forward, ensuring that this expanse remained wild but protected, its stories recorded and revered. A gust rattled the camera's housing, and he felt the valley whisper thanks. He guided the Mustang onto a flat stretch of grass where hidden footprints told of coyotes and elk. He sketched their tracks into his notebook, preserving each shape for future rangers who would follow in his wake. As midday sun climbed high, he paused at a rise and removed the bridle from the saddle, fastening it to a driftwood post marking the creek's boundary. A small plaque beneath it bore Joshua's name and Midnight Sun's infinity symbol, a quiet memorial in the heart of the expanse. Riding on, the ranger felt the valley's breadth pulse beneath him, a vast canvas for every bond, man to horse, human to wild, past to present. In this open expanse, their echoes would forever ride the wind. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ridge where the ranger paused, breath catching at the sight before him. Jagged petroglyphs stretched across the sandstone face, symbols of horses, humans, and interwoven lines that mirrored the infinity motif he'd seen in Joshua Hart's carvings. These ancient markings predated all written records, whispering of a time when man and Mustang walked as equals, their fates entwined under the same vast sky. He dismounted and ran his hand over the etched stone, fingertips tracing each groove worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. The stallion stepped forward, nose pressed gently against his shoulder, as though urging him to decipher this hidden message. The ranger knelt before a set of glyphs showing a figure offering water to a horse, an echo of shadow